And we do see that competition heating up between all these different countries and entities accumulating. So you have, in addition to the ETFs in the US, you have companies like MicroStrategy, Tether, which are accumulating massive amounts of Bitcoin, and other countries mining Bitcoin like Bhutan. So there's not a lot of Bitcoin left. And I think perhaps most governments don't fully understand that it's a limited supply, because in the fiat world, it's all unlimited. You can print as much as you want. But with Bitcoin, there's definitely a point at which you cannot compete it and get a lot of Bitcoin. Like, how hard is it going to be to get 250,000 Bitcoin for the next MicroStrategy? Almost impossible, because
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like MicroStrategy, Tether, like the ETFs in the US, these guys are not going to stop buying Bitcoin, right? It doesn't seem like Michael Saylor is going to stop anytime soon. And then now you have, if the US goes first, and if Trump is able to buy 1 million Bitcoins for this reserve, which seems far-fetched, but like, hey, if it happens, like, there's not much Bitcoin left. Like, how much? I mean, it's over what, like 95% of the Bitcoins that will ever be mined have been mined already, right? So there's not that much left. And yeah, it's easy to see how like an arms race could happen here, for just trying to accumulate this stuff as fast as possible. If Trump does, like, say if he does win and he's like, this is the first thing we're doing when I enter office is buying Bitcoin, which is obviously probably not going to happen. But if he does like signal that this is a priority, that could trigger, potentially an arms race of people trying to maybe front run the US in some way, or like, yeah, I mean, once Bitcoin hits 1 million, it's going to be a lot tougher to like get in on that game, right? So that is something, but that is something that, like, I mean, I'll confess, I'd never even heard the idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve floated until like this past summer, when Trump and I think like Cynthia Lummis was talking about it. But I was like, wow, that's actually a really good idea. And I mean, is that something that has been resonating with other countries? Like, once that idea started being circulated, are people like, hey, maybe we should consider doing this too? Is that something they're taking seriously?
Well, this is what we are working on at Jan 3, to meet and tell them, hey, this is happening in the US. Do you have a plan? Do you want a plan? But, people are easily distracted by their own problems. Every country has their own social, economic things to deal with. But it's kind of our mission to tell them, hey, these are the different things happening around the world, and it's time to get prepared. And the question is, which place in line do you want to be? Do you want to be first, second, or 20th? So it's bringing these topics up and presenting them and really getting their eyes open to the state of the world. That is important, I think. And we'll see which ones go first. But there's definitely a first mover advantage, and it could be that second and third place never catch up to number one.
That's interesting. That's kind of been my thesis around El Salvador. Why I find El Salvador so fascinating is that, like, directionally, I feel like they're directionally correct. Where, like, at some point, it's inevitable they're going to end up being like the richest country in the world, if they keep doing what they're doing, right? Or maybe not, like, but you know what I mean? Like, they're going to end up, like, there's no way this is not going to be successful if everything kind of goes according to how we're envisioning things progressing here in the future. And having that first mover advantage for such a small country seems like, like in 100 years time, people could be looking back on this like, wow, that was like the best decision anyone could have possibly made. And I want to just kind of like touch on the El Salvador story quickly, because I know you're pretty heavily involved in that, and want to just get some like reflections on, like, how do you think this is going so far, and like how do they kind of move the ball forward, like 3 years into this experiment?
Well, I think it's gone quite well for them. It's definitely a massive rebrand where people consider it as Bitcoin country and they want to go there with their families. It's boosted GDP, it's boosted tourism. It's had many positive effects on the country. And the challenge I see is moving forward, what happens in 4 or 5 years? What happens at the end of Bukele's term? And this is why also we are doing what we're doing at Jan 3, because we want more Bitcoin countries. And we have to take advantage of this time that we've been given, where we have this anchor point, which is a country that has made Bitcoin a core part of their strategy and has made it legal tender. So if we do nothing and we just wait, then maybe this will all fizzle out in a few years' time. But this is an opportunity, I think, where we can take this and run with it and get more countries on board. And it's better this way too, that there are more countries holding Bitcoin than just, a handful of countries, and predominantly Western countries like the US and the UK and big countries like China. You want more countries holding Bitcoin like Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, and, distribution of wealth around the world. It's a tale as old as time, right? The loan sharks don't like it when you make their business redundant. And that's really what Bitcoin does. Like, these groups can only lend out money that can be printed easily, right? Creating the SDR, does not exist. And unfortunately, it still kind of can be used as a bargaining chip by giving cheap money to these countries. But Bitcoin makes it so that you don't need that anymore. You can actually take a slow, steady, sustainable path to growth by embracing hard money and utilizing energy to mine Bitcoin. So the whole formula for money has changed. Money is now energy and information, because Bitcoin is energy information. So you can mine Bitcoin using geothermal or hydro or whatever you have that previously you could not utilize, right? With oil, it's easy. You put it into a bucket or a barrel and you ship it. But with geothermal, what's the incentive? Unless you want to create some energy intensive industry that uses it on site, there's not much you can do. But Bitcoin changes that. And I think it is going to have a massive effect as countries discover this, that, hey, we're actually a rich country, right? And a lot of the countries that have massive geothermal energy reserves are quite poor relatively. So this whole equation is changing the world, and we'll see that playing out to further make these organizations like the IMF and the World Bank redundant.
So do you think that the El Salvador case study or the experiment has helped it to reduce dependency on the IMF or these types of groups so far? Or is that kind of like a 5, 10 year, 20 year play in the future as this all matures?
It's hard to say. I think El Salvador is still engaging with the IMF because possibly they want funding from the IMF, but it's definitely put them on a good trajectory, not just Bitcoin itself, but good management, in that they're not fiscally irresponsible. So, their traditional bonds are trading at the highest amount that they have been in decades. But we just see Bitcoin, countries that embrace Bitcoin or are open to Bitcoin seem to be far more fiscally responsible. And that definitely has an impact on just general well-being of these economies.
So over the last couple of years since El Salvador made their big announcements and their big moves, we've seen a number of other countries kind of flirting with this idea of adopting Bitcoin or legalizing Bitcoin or making it legal tender. Places like Panama, I think Central African Republic was on there too. And, and these things, they had some momentum, then they kind of fizzled out, or they didn't make it across the finish line for whatever reason. But why haven't we seen other nation states really replicate what El Salvador has done as of yet? I mean, I think there's a number of factors. Maybe you have a very sort of charismatic, motivated politician, head of state in El Salvador, that is obviously sort of pushing this and kind of staking his own reputation on this, which, that's a pretty unique thing. But generally, what's maybe taking longer than maybe some people would have thought for this kind of hyper-Bitcoinization to occur on a nation state level?
Interesting question. I would say we just need more time. But the Central African Republic was more trying to use it as a marketing stunt. I don't think they really understood Bitcoin, or they were just kind of trying to ride the coattails of El Salvador. But, you could say Argentina has opened up to Bitcoin, right? They still have dealings with the IMF, so they can't arbitrarily do something as bold as El Salvador, but Milei has deregulated money, and he's said kind of between the lines, you can use Bitcoin, or his government has said you can use Bitcoin to settle trade. So there's kind of an implicit understanding that you can use Bitcoin in Argentina, because he wants competition between currencies. So it's another path to Bitcoin adoption. But I think the important thing to understand is, if you've read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you know that there are forces out there that don't want Bitcoin to be adopted. And these probably are running interference with people that do want Bitcoin to be adopted. But ultimately, Bitcoin is on the verge of failure. So It's just a matter of time, really. And hopefully we at Jan3 can help is inevitable. Everyone will need Bitcoin because all of the fiat currencies are on the push this process along and make it a bit faster.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned Confessions of an Economic Hitman, because that's kind of, it was one of those books that's helped form my worldview back when I was younger. And it was really one of these, it helps you just kind of understand the world better for like how it actually operates, right? And like how these international financial systems, how, you know, they're all kind of masked in like flowery, like, you know, rhetoric, like, oh, we're here to like do good for the world or whatever. But a lot of this stuff is like pretty predatory, right? And for me, like that was one of the first things that resonated with me about Bitcoin as well, was like, wow, like this could actually be, this is something that exists outside of that framework that countries, people can latch onto and leverage outside of this kind of, you know, predatory scheme that's been kind of running our world financial system for the longest time.
Yeah, well, money is a very potent form of control. So he who controls the money controls the people. You can incentivize people to do things like build roads. Like if you can print money, you can make them build roads or go fight in wars or do a number of things. And it's also a way to control other countries too. So if they're dependent on your money, not just in Latin America, but in Africa with the CFA franc, you can extract resources. You can extract human resources or physical resources or whatever you want, as long as you control the money. So this is why Bitcoin is so disruptive and so powerful, because it breaks that ability for people to control others. Well, so long as you're holding Bitcoin in your own self-custody and you have your own keys. But you get the idea. It really transforms the entire landscape of the world. And the best part is that it is inevitable. So even if we didn't do anything, this will come to pass. A Bitcoin standard will come to pass because there is no alternative. There's no way a government can save the fiat currency. It means that you'd have to have massive amounts of restraint and discipline to not print. And we know that's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the discipline just go out the window over the last few years, right? It's just a question of, people in Latin America will pile into stable coins, right, as a way of hedging against their own currency. But it's like, well, the US dollar is also depreciating in the same way as it's just maybe not as fast as some of the other currencies, but it's still depreciating, right? Still all headed in the same direction at the end of the day, right? So when we talk about Bitcoin adoption at a national scale, and you gave a few different definitions of what we mean by Bitcoin adoption. There's a variety of different things that could mean. Like how viable is this over the next like 5-10 years? Really from, kind of a mass adoption standpoint, I guess we'll call it. And I mean, I guess there's probably some, Bitcoiners out there who might push back on this idea that we need to be promoting this in like a top-down fashion, and that Bitcoin needs to be kind of this organic, sort of bottom-up, more of an organic thing, I guess. So just love your kind of thoughts on like you're saying it's inevitable, like how does it actually get to the point where it's inevitable like this?
Well, it has to do with Bitcoin increasing in value, right? So as Bitcoin number goes up, then it gets harder and harder to have people accept the fiat, because it's more apparent that when Bitcoin is at 1 million or $5 million a coin, do people still want to get paid in pesos or Canadian dollars or yen? I don't think so, right? Like it's difficult to see it now. Although as Bitcoin as we see it, going from 0 to 66K or 67, whatever it now, it kind of shows you like this thing is rapidly increasing and there's no stopping it. And for other people, I think you have to see it. They'll probably need to see it at 250,000 and higher before that realization dawns on them, because you cannot look at this asset class that has gone from 0 to 250,000 in 20 years and still say, well, it's just a fad, and the fiat currency that's dropped another 100% in value and purchasing power is going to somehow come back, right? There's a point of no coming back. And I think this is a problem that most of the models for Bitcoin price appreciation miss out on, which is they're projecting for decades. I think it's more like 5 to 10 years, if that. And at some point, you just stop accepting fiat, because why would you?